Hi writers and readers, I'm Christy Stratus, and today we continue on with our viewer request videos. This video and the next three, I believe, following it are going to be all about revision. This was a highly requested topic on my channel. Almost everyone who left a comment on what they wanted to see on my channel left revision. So I'm really excited to deal with this because it's a difficult one for most writers. A lot of writers find that creating is really fun, really interesting, and that's the good part, and then revising is like, it's awful. So I have some suggestions for you, and I have, well, actually more than some. I have so many that it's 4 videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them into different sections, and then I'm not going to make you wait until next week to see the rest of these videos. I'm going to publish part 1 today, then part 2 tomorrow, part 3 the day after, part 4 the day after. So you don't really have to wait too long. So I'm going to split it down. Today we're going to talk about the basics and style, and that's going to include things like how to know if you should delete something, especially if you're married to it, how to think of editing if you really don't like it, how to be brutally honest with yourself, and how to stop yourself from getting derailed. So let's start with being brutally honest. First of all, I just have to make a disclaimer. Regardless of how good of an editor you are, how many times you go over your piece, it's really best to have an editor. I know that not everybody can afford one. If you can find one that is just building up their business or something like that and they're doing it for free, great. If you can go to someone who typically handles indie authors and is not like in the thousands and thousands of dollars range, great. I will leave the link to my own business down below in case you want to check it out. You do get a 10% discount. That's the only thing I'm going to mention, and now I'm done mentioning that. But it is important to get an actual editor. There are things you cannot see yourself, and I will definitely talk about that in another video. Actually, there may be 5 parts to this series because I just thought of something else we really need to talk about. So anyway, first thing I want to talk about is being brutally honest. So it sounds really simple. You just tell yourself the truth, right? No big deal. No, it goes beyond that. The problem is that many times we spend a lot of time on a sentence or a paragraph or a character, and then where we really should be cutting it, we end up keeping it because we're in love with it. That's really difficult. But there are ways to tell if you should be deleting it. So if you are reading your book, and there are a couple of scenarios that I can point out that are really specific. If you're reading your book and you read a sentence that you don't, it doesn't seem to make sense, you reread it, and then you say, oh right, I remember what I was saying here. Nope, no good, this means you have to edit it. That means if you don't get it yourself reading the book over, then your reader is definitely not going to get it. You need to make sure that that sentence is very readable. Don't just skip things like, oh, it's going to be fine, no big deal. Look at that sentence and fix it for sure. Don't even question it. Then if you're going through and you come across something where you sort of cringe or you feel insecure about it, if you read a sentence over, especially this especially happens with creative sentences, like where you're really getting artsy, or any kind of like maybe a joke or something like that, you read it over and you kind of get that internal, that's so terrible, I hate it, you know, but you can't, you've spent a lot of time on it, or you're just like, well, I have to have something like that in there. Let's just move on, no big deal, it's just one sentence. Well, how many of those one sentences are going to build up? You're going to have a book full of things that you hate or that you just don't want to fix because it's either too much work or you spend a lot of time with it. The one thing that you can never let stop you from editing is when you have already spent a lot of time writing a sentence or something similar, you worked on it so hard, you reread it, you cringe a little bit, and you say, but I already invested so much time, nobody's going to notice, let's skip it. They are going to notice, and you could get taken down for that in the reviews. Like, that's the one thing you want to keep in your head. And I'm not talking about this from a money standpoint, I'm talking about this as your author reputation. If you're leaving lots of stuff in there where you're like, I'm cringing but I don't know how to fix it, that's a problem. So what you want to do is really look at that sentence and break it down. What is it that's bothering you? And I saw recently a blog post by an author who said start asking yourself questions about it and say, you know, well, what is it about the sentence that I don't like? Well, it's a little bit too silly. Well, what makes it too silly? What's the problem with it? You know, and start really breaking it down. What's going to happen because of that is not only are you going to fix the sentence, but you're going to grow as an author, because as you can break down and analyze what bothers you in your book, whether it's characters, plot, or sentence structure, or anything like that, you are figuring out your do's and don'ts for your own writing style. And if you start skipping over things and saying, it's no big deal, just ignore it, it doesn't matter, it's not enough to worry about, I spent too much time on that to try to change it now, you are then telling yourself that not good enough is good enough. So you don't want to do that. Cringy content isn't good enough for you. You write better than that. So take the time to break it down, really think about it. It is worth that time. And then as you keep doing that and keep doing that, not only are you telling yourself, this is the quality of my content and I refuse to let it drop, but in the future, more and more, as you do that more and more, you're going to stop writing stuff like that. Or when you do write stuff like that, you're going to immediately recognize it and you're going to say, this is just the first draft, I'm going to highlight it, I got to change that sentence, move on. This is really important stuff for your entire writing career. This isn't just, let's just fix this at the moment. This is actually, I'm giving you advice that's going to help you for the rest of your life. Another way to know if you need to delete something, like let's say you read a paragraph and you really like it, you're not sure if it belongs, maybe your editor told you it doesn't belong. One thing that can happen is, especially if you really enjoy a paragraph that you wrote, you personally like it, or you think it shows something with the character, like you like that character and it's a whole paragraph about that character, or you described a city or something like that that you just like, or you spent time on, again, because that is a big problem when we writers spend major time on something and then we don't like it anymore, it's hard to delete it. What you want to do is say, what does this sentence, what does this paragraph, what does this chapter sometimes accomplish? And again, you're analyzing, you're breaking things down, you're being totally brutally honest with yourself. In some cases, you're saying, it doesn't actually accomplish anything. There was a scene in Anatomy of a Darkened Heart that I was so excited to write. I was pumped for, actually, I believe it was a couple of months to write this. I had it brewing in my head for all that time. I was so excited. And then I wrote the scene before it, and I no longer needed that scene that I was so looking forward to writing. It was one of the most disappointing things, just because I had pretty much already written it in my head and I was in love with it. I was married to it. And I tried every which way to convince myself that I needed to write that scene. And it's not like it was going to be, you know, pages and pages or anything like that. It was going to be like maybe 2 pages. But it was unnecessary and it would have dragged things on. It was too much and I needed to not do it. It was painful, but I cut it. So this is something similar. This is the one thing that I would say Twitter actually helps with a lot. When you're putting up a Twitter post and you only have 140 characters, you have to pick very carefully which words you're going to use and which words really matter and which tags really matter. That's a good exercise when you're trying to, and that's another thing that flash fiction is also good for. If you say, I'm going to challenge myself to write this in 500 words, what is not necessary? You would be shocked how much you can cut out when you really need to, or how much you can condense something. If you feel like you're being too wordy, pick out the words that actually matter to the paragraph, like bold them or something. You will be surprised how few words you actually bolded. In some cases, you might be surprised that the whole thing is necessary, but the whole point is that you have to be really, really brutal with, do we really need this word? What does that have to do with anything? You know, and it sounds really tedious, but as you go along, you're going to get used to this. You get better and better at it. Again, this is something you can use for the rest of your writing life. If you're someone who gets derailed from your writing, and tell me if this is what you meant for the person who asked that, I believe it was Antonio. If you get derailed from your writing, and the problem is more that you find it overwhelming or you get easily distracted or whatever it is, one thing that you can do is go through the manuscript and just focus on one character. This doesn't, or something like that. This does not mean that you have to read the manuscript 20 times and, you know, only focusing on that character. What it does mean is you might want to do a search for that character and read the sections that go along with him or her. And for me, I really like that idea because when I go through, I get to know that character really well and I spot inconsistencies much easier because I'm saying, whoa, he's coming across way too friendly in that scene. He was just a jerk in the last scene. And so not only is it's gonna help you focus on editing, it's going to also help you focus on whatever it is you're really trying to accomplish there. And by having the focus of that one character, not only is it less overwhelming, but you might start to feel like you're really getting to know that character and investing even more of yourself in that character by spending so much time with just that person. Another thing that I like to do is sit down and say, okay, I'm just going to read my book. And when I say that, instead of saying I'm going to get into editing mode now, you know, which is just, sometimes you just feel like, ugh, a worry. By just saying you're going to read your book, it seems a lot more casual. Again, this is more of like a psychological approach. It's just more casual, you're just enjoying your writing, but as you go along, things are going to bother you, things are going to annoy you, and you're going to start getting into the editing, or at least that's how it works for me. I always just start going through a section, and sometimes I just read on. Sometimes that's what I do. I just focus on reading through it and really not looking at, oh, let me nitpick about this comma or this word that I don't like or this cliche that I'm going to take out. And another thing is, as you're writing, one thing that I like to do is highlight sections that I know need work or need to be changed, or words that I don't like. I just click the highlight button and that's it. And I just know that I need to go back. So sometimes I'll go back starting with those highlighted sections. Then I'll say, okay, now I need to focus on this character. Now I need to focus on how these sections are broken down, stuff like that. And when you break it down that way, it's a much smaller job. Another way is to, again, it all really comes to breaking it down, unless you're going to do the just reading through. It all comes down to breaking things down into bite-sized portions so it doesn't seem so overwhelming. So if you say, I'm just going to do this chapter or just this page even, you can even just say this page. Personally, I'm a fan of doing just one character or one looking for sentence structure, something like that at a time. But you could say, let me just look at this page and look at everything on it, and that's the one thing I'm going to focus on, and then I'm going to go do something else, you know? And if you just hate editing in general, the only part you like is writing, understandable. There are lots of writers like that who are just, once they finish the book, they just want to send it off somewhere. But really, you should read through it again because you will start catching things that you had no idea were wrong with the book. I like to think of it this way. Editing is like the detail work. It's like when you look at jewelry, when you see either engraving work or filigree work, which is the part that's cut out of some really pretty jewelry, that's what you're doing when you're editing. You're giving those fine details. Now you've got the ring itself, you've got that solid metal, and you've got some kind of nice jewel or gem or whatever in there, and you're putting the facets on the gem, and you're putting all the engraving on that part of the ring, the gold or the silver or whatever. That's just a better way to think of it, in my opinion. This is all the fine tuning, and what you're doing is making your work just beautiful. So that's it for this episode about style and the very basics of revision. If you have any additional questions, leave them down below. I'm happy to do more videos about this. I really enjoy it, in case you couldn't tell. I'm going to be doing more videos. The next one will be revising characters. The one after that will be plot or lack thereof. And if you're wondering, yes, you can write it without a plot, and I'll talk more about that. And then there's also going to be one to encourage you when you feel that you are doing so much revising or you keep rewriting and rewriting. I have gone through that, and I'm going to share with you just how much I did to that book and how to go about it. And I just want to encourage you guys that even if it takes so much work to put something out there, it can be so worth it. Very, very rewarding experience. I would also like to share with you some revision tips I've heard that I completely disagree with, and maybe we'll have a discussion in the comment section about that in case you agree with some of these things I disagree with. But there are some pieces of advice I've heard out there that can really hurt your novel more than help you. So those are the upcoming videos. Like I said, this one is posted today, and then a second will be posted the next day. You don't have to wait a week. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you tomorrow.